The old school physique is coming back. People want to see more of a balanced, pleasing physique with an aesthetic posing routine. You know, back in our time, it was an art.
Joe Weider, you know, he was a visionary, and he established the Mr Olympia contest in 1965.
The first Mr Olympia event was held in September of 1965 at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in New York.
Larry Scott was the first ever Mr. Olympia, and in both physique and professionalism, he set the standard for all future Mr. Olympias to come.
He walked out in silhouette and just stood there. And of course, with those arms and those delts, you could tell it was Larry Scott.
The ovation that Larry Scott got was probably the biggest reception that anyone's ever gotten at a bodybuilding show ever.
So I want to win it the second time, so at least I can say that it wasn't one time. I won it twice.
And Larry, you know, won the title those first 2 years, and then he decided to retire. He had other things to do. And along came Sergio.
Sergio Oliva was unbeatable in his 3 years, 1967, 1968, and 1969 of Olympia supremacy.
Sergio is one of the most gifted genetic bodybuilders there ever was.
And he went from being a weightlifter to being a bodybuilder, and he had these incredible genetics, probably some of the best genetics to this day in bodybuilding. He's probably one of the most genetically, if not the most genetically gifted bodybuilders ever. What set Sergio apart was he had this really tiny 27, 28-inch waist. And then he had all this, his body parts were incredible. I mean, he had no genetic weak points. Every bodybuilder usually has 2 or 3 body parts that are weaker than the rest of them.
Yeah.
Sergio had no weak body parts. He had everything. He had the chest, back, shoulders, traps. He had forearms. He had calves, thighs. His legs were huge for back then in the 60s.
Sergio Oliva was so far ahead of his time in at least one competition the others didn't bother turning up.
Back there, the Olympia was different, you know. When I went the American without even compete, because they were afraid to come to the stage, and they gave me all the trophy because they don't want to compete.
And then he won it in 68, and nobody went in the contest. Everybody stayed away from it. He was the only competitor. Chuck Sipes didn't go in it. Harold Poole didn't go in it.
Wow.
No one dared to go up against him because they could see he was such a freak, and he was amazing back then. He was so big, but he was really cut too. He had really good muscularity.
The only man to outmuscle Arnold Schwarzenegger.
They had a pose down, and it was really close. It was a 4-3 vote, but Sergio. I mean, Arnold said that Sergio just psyched him out and blew him away. So
yeah.
I don't think Arnold believed that he could beat Sergio at that point. Arnold trained really hard all year, and he also got Joe Weider to bring over Franco. So he was able to train with Franco, and they trained really, really hard. Arnold knew he had to be bigger in order to beat Sergio.
So along came Arnold, who was a blueprint for what you wanted in a bodybuilder, what Joe Weider wanted. You know, he wanted the best bodybuilder in the world to have charisma, a PR brain, a sense of humor.
Hey, look, Franco, what you have to do is when I say side chest, then hit the side chest and then it come out. And if you don't have it, don't hit it. No, don't hit it.
Somebody who could connect with an audience. You could have almost written it and said, let's get this guy.
At that time, that was the first contest that he was on his mark, he looked good, and Sergio was a little bit off, and everything was right, and Arnold won.
Way back when I started training, I visualized what my body should look like to be the best in the world. And then, when I had this vision in front of me all the time, I then could go after that.
He had a physique back then that excelled anything that any Mr. Olympia has right now. I mean, we work with him all day long, and we don't see bodies better, you know, physiques better than what Arnold had.
In November of 1975, Schwarzenegger held his 6th Mr. Olympia trophy before a cheering crowd, and then announced that he would be retiring from bodybuilding competition.
There's nobody who can beat me, and there was nobody in the future who can beat me, so therefore I quit.
In 1976, at his 5th attempt to win the title, Franco Columbu climbed atop the Olympia throne. With striated chest and bat-like lats, Franco swept to victory.
Franco had a great back, striations, so he won more on, you know, that impact.
In 1976, made me really happy when they called me one day, Ben Wither, and says, Franco, I don't know, maybe you don't like this. We are making only one class, no more two classes. To win the overall Mr. Olympia in 1976, because until that point, no Olympia, nobody won the Mr. Olympia unless he was 6 feet tall.
In taking the Olympia title in 1977, 1978, and 1979, Frank Zane ushered in a new era of bodybuilding that encompassed superb conditioning allied with aesthetic appeal and classic presentation.
In 1977, winning the Olympia meant a cash prize of $5,000 and the trophy, which I got to learn later was the first year they gave out the Sandow Trophy. And so I'm the recipient of that, but I didn't know it at the time.
Zane was like a walking statue. You know, he practiced his posing to perfection. You know, there's every pose was thought out so that the waist would be kept slender, the leg would be splayed out to show the quadriceps and calves and everything.
I think I was much more meticulous than anybody else that competed at that time, and probably even now.
He had a type of physique that was very acceptable to the average guy. And I don't mean in any kind of negative, but the average guy could say, hey, if I trained hard, I could probably look close to that.
And, you know, I basically had a goal. I wanted to make the most of my physique and go to the top, win Mr. Olympia, and however long it took. You know, 1977 was already my, what was it? The years I competed, 72, 74, 75. It was my 5th try for Olympia in 77. So 5, 6, and 7 were the magic years for me, 77, 78, 79. And, but, you know, it was all because my training conditions continued to improve. That was my goal. I knew that to get to the top, I'd have to have impeccable conditions for training. Everything had to be perfect, and it was.
What about you, Arnold? I heard rumors you're doing it. And he said, no, I'm just doing the commentary for CBS television. I'm not competing in the show. So he loses it. He gets up and he goes over to Arnold and he puts a finger in his face, and they start arguing, and everybody that was there said they thought there was going to be a fight.
The morning of the show, the atmosphere was much different. There was a tension there. There was a hostility and negativity that skewed everyone's normal perception and, of course, prevented anyone from deriving the pleasure they might have had otherwise. Everything was askew at this point. It was not a normal contest. No one was talking or acting as the way they usually do. There was a strain and tension in the air all the way through.